wrote about it. Others wrote about it, and the story went out all over the country, all over the world, that a couple of Yemenis on the terror watch list had been apprehended at the border. The next day, story's gone. And even the Reuters report and all the other reports, they linked to Customs and Border Patrol's press release, but you went to Customs and Border Patrol press release and it said access denied. The news was gone. And it has never returned, and it's never been explained. It's clear, though, what's going on, that the Biden administration, aided by a compliant, sycophantic media, is determined to ensure as much complacency and ignorance as they possibly can. And so they erased the news, and most people don't know it happened. And now you can't find out anything that will tell you that it did happen, except crackpot wingnut sites like Jihad Watch, and who listens to them? So this is just one incident of many, because in the first place, we know that the Biden administration lies, that they lie like they breathe, they lie as a matter of course, and that if they tell you that two people on the terror watch list were caught, probably others were as well. And then, of course, they're the others who weren't caught. We know that the Border Patrol has had for years a category called OTMs, other than Mexicans, of people who are crossing the border, who are not Mexican nationals, often posing as Mexican nationals, and they come in from Afghanistan, from Iraq, from Somalia, from Nigeria, from other jihad terror hotspots. And they come into the United States. There was a Hezbollah operative active in Michigan a few years ago, and he was active in the United States for quite a few years before he was apprehended. Turned out when he was arrested that he had crossed over illegally from Mexico. This is something that jihadis have been exploiting for years, and now Biden's people have made it easier than ever. So that's the border. Then there are all these Afghan refugees. Now, the Afghan refugees, this is an incredible snafu. You probably have heard in the first place that we owe it to these people, right? We owe them a favor. We owe them safety. We owe them a new life in a new land because they stuck their necks out in Afghanistan for us. They were interpreters for the US military. They aided the military in other ways. And so we got to take care of them. It's just honorable. Now, of course, the problem here is that here again, the Biden administration, which is utterly mendacious and completely dishonest and never releases the information that makes it look bad to its fullest extent, has acknowledged that most of these Afghans that we're bringing into the United States, 95,000 Afghans we're bringing into the United States, thousands of them are already here. They're not the interpreters. They're not actually the people we owe the favors at all. And so the whole thing has been sold to the American people on false pretenses. It's a bill of goods, the whole thing. There are two kinds of people that we've been told make up the group of Afghans who are refugees in the United States, or soon will be. One is the special immigrant visa holders, and the other are the interpreters. And the Biden administration has already acknowledged the special immigrant visa holders, or the special immigrant visas are given to people like the interpreters to fast track their way into the United States. You know, returning the favor they did for us. These are not the people we're bringing in. So who are the people we're bringing in? Nobody knows. Nobody has any idea who these people are. And remember, they're not coming from France. They're not coming from England. They're coming from Afghanistan. Afghanistan is a jihadi hotspot any way you slice it. There are people there who don't like the Taliban. Why? Because they favor ISIS. there are people there who are not affiliated with the Taliban because they're affiliated with Al-Qaeda. Are there a lot of people in Afghanistan who are Ozzie Nelson in Kandahar who are going to come over to the United States and be fine, upstanding citizens? Yes, I'm sure there are a few. But most of the people in Afghanistan, not just some, but most, believe that waging jihad against unbelievers is a righteous and honorable thing that will get them rewards from Allah. And not only do they think that, but they believe in Sharia. And Islamic law, Sharia, mandates discrimination against women, discrimination against non-Muslims, vicious anti-Semitism, all kinds of things that are going to make for societal friction when you have large amounts. And we're bringing over 95, that's the number they've admitted. So it's probably more than 95,000 people we're bringing into the United States. And they have this vastly different point of view. And they generally believe that it is meritorious to wage jihad against unbelievers. They're coming into this land full of unbelievers. What might some of them do? And then there's the Hijra. Islamic law teaches that you will be, at the end of your life, go before the awesome judgment of Allah. And he has these big scales. This is chapter 21, verse 47 of the Quran. You can look it up. And the big scales, your good deeds go in one and your bad deeds go in the other. And if your good deeds outweigh your bad deeds, then you go to paradise. If your bad deeds outweigh your good deeds, you go to hell. Now imagine if you believed that. It would, speaking strictly for myself, it would drive me crazy. And I would probably become a jihadi. Why? Because jihad is the way out of the craziness that this idea gives you. Now, at first glance, it seems completely innocuous. Okay, so your good deeds and your bad deeds are in the scale, so try to be good, big deal. But think about it some more. How much do your good deeds weigh? How much do your bad deeds weigh? How many good deeds have you committed? How many bad deeds have you committed? Nobody knows the answers to those questions. And so if you are a believing Muslim and you're afraid of hell, and hell is very luridly luridly described in tremendous detail in the Quran, then you're going to go nuts thinking, okay, what if my bad deeds outweigh my good deeds? What am I going to do? How am I going to avoid going to hell, where I'm going to get my skin roasted off and then Allah will issue me a new skin so I can be tortured some more, and where he'll make me drink molten lead? Those things are in the Quran and more. How can I avoid this? Well, the Quran guarantees paradise to those who kill and are killed for Allah. This is chapter 9, verse 111. If you want to be sure that you're going to paradise, then strap on a suicide bomb and blow yourself up in the crowd of infidels, and you have killed and been killed for Allah. You're going straight to paradise. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. You're all set. But maybe you don't want to do that. Obviously, that's very difficult. And most human beings love life, and they don't want to blow themselves up in a crowd of infidels, no matter what the inducements may be to do that. Most Muslims don't want to do that. It goes against everything that is part of human nature. So the Quran also gives you another thing you can do. Chapter 4, verse 100 says that if you emigrate in the way of Allah, then you will get great reward from Allah. Emigrate, you leave your country, you go to another country to bring Islam to it. You're not just going to the other country to get a good job or to be safe out of a war zone. You have to bring Islam to the new country. If you do that, you're going to get rewards from Allah. That's probably going to tip the scales in your favor. And so it's a very appealing idea to a pious, knowledgeable Muslim to emigrate in the way of Allah. As a matter of fact, that's the beginning of Islam. not when Muhammad became a prophet, not when Muhammad was born or died, but Islam becomes Islam, according to the Islamic calendar. Year one of the Islamic calendar is when Muhammad emigrated, left Mecca for Medina, and became a military and political leader as well as a spiritual one. So you have all these people coming. Are some of them thinking that they're emigrating in the cause of Allah? I don't think there's any doubt about that. There's no way that could not be so, that at least some of them think they're going to bring Islam here, which means bring wife beating here, bring anti-Semitism here, bring jihad against infidels here. All these things are part of Islam. And some of them are going to be thinking that. The main thing is, though, we have no idea who these people are, as I said before. And I'll be very clear about this. Just the other day, the Biden administration had to admit, which is how it usually happens, had to admit under pressure, that there are 12,000 Afghan refugees in the United States now. They have already gotten here. And they are already being resettled in American cities. And they don't have any ID whatsoever. So they tell us on the news, you know, Jake Tapper and Brian Stelter and those guys will tell us these people are all being very carefully vetted. But the real story came out when Representative Darrell Issa from California went to Qatar, to a camp near Doha, where these Afghans are being processed and then brought to the United States. And he went with a congressional delegation, a bunch of congressmen. They wouldn't let them in. They stopped them at ALLthat Air Base in Doha. They wouldn't let them in to the camp where the Afghans are. Why not? Who knows? But in the course of their discussions with the military officials they were talking to at ALLthat, they were told that these guys are coming into the United States with no identification whatsoever. They do not have any idea who they are. So how could they possibly have vetted them? They could not have possibly vetted them. There is no way you can vet somebody when you don't know who he is.
Right.
So they're going to check to see if these guys are jihadis. Meanwhile, these people are in the American military, which doesn't even admit there is a jihad. They don't know what jihadis think. They don't know what jihadis believe. I used to train military men in military officers, excuse me, in how to deal with understanding what jihadis believed. And Obama stopped that 10 years ago. So how are they going to know how to vet in the first place? And how are they going to check the backgrounds of these people and see if they're in the Taliban or in ISIS or in Al-Qaeda? And remember also, there was a prison at Bagram Air Base in Kabul, the United States Air Base, Bagram Air Base in Afghanistan. And there were thousands, not just a couple, there were thousands of ISIS and Al-Qaeda prisoners in it. And the US, under the Biden administration, left Bagram Air Base in the dark of night without telling even the Afghan National Army, our supposed allies, not telling them we were leaving, just up and left. And they get up the next morning and we're gone. The Taliban comes in not long after that, and they open the prison doors, and all these people go out, the ISIS and Al-Qaeda guys, and not long after that, you see the long lines at the Kabul airport, people trying to get on the transports to the United States. Who got on the transports but the strongest, the most ruthless, the best armed? Why? Because you got a huge crush of people. How are you going to fight through it unless you're tough? Unless maybe you're a jihadi, unless you're a young man of military age who can overpower the other people in the line and get to the front. So any number of ISIS and Al-Qaeda guys is likely among these people. We don't know who they are. And meanwhile, then we have the enemy within. Now, you might think I'm talking about the Muslim Brotherhood or something. No, I'm talking about the Catholic Church. Pardon me if you're Catholic, I'm sorry, I don't mean any offense, actually. I'm talking about refugee resettlement. The Catholic Church got, at last report, $95 million a year for refugee resettlement from the United States government. And so they have 95 million reasons to press the US government to bring in more refugees. There has never been any indication that Pope Francis or the bishops in the United States have any idea of what they're subjecting the Western countries to when they push for mass migration. They have a huge financial incentive to push for mass migration, and at the same time, they guilt trip Catholics and other people into thinking that they have to be in favor of this because otherwise they're not welcoming to the stranger, and that's a gospel virtue. So all these people are being brought in. Catholic Charities is resettling them. I saw a story the other day. They're giving them furnished apartments in Kansas City. Now, wouldn't that be, I'd like a furnished apartment in Kansas City. That would be nice, you know, but nobody's offering these kinds of things to American citizens. There are plenty of people who are in need in the United States, plenty of people who are homeless.
I'll send you a new one, okay?
Who are poor, all kinds of things. It's not just that only these people are in need. There are plenty of people right here already who are in need, but somehow they have taken precedence. So you get set up, you're an Afghan refugee, you're a jihadi, you get a nice furnished apartment in Kansas City, you get settled, you scout out the area, you find a good place, you carry out a jihad massacre. How possible is that? How likely is that? Maybe it won't happen in Kansas City. It's going to happen somewhere in the United States over the next couple of years. We're going to see criminal activity, jihad activity from refugees from Afghanistan who we are settling with no regard for the safety and well-being of the American people at our own expense, courtesy of the United States government, courtesy of the Catholic Church, and all because of misplaced ideas about our responsibilities and a refusal on an institutional level on the part of both the US government and the church to, and not just the Catholic Church, I should say, of course, also many other churches and other secular organizations are involved in refugee resettlement. And they all have the same thing. It just happened to be that the Kansas City story I was seeing was connected with Catholic Charities. But they're all involved in the same kind of willful ignorance in terms of refusing to acknowledge the nature and magnitude of the jihad threat, refusing to acknowledge the cultural dislocation that is involved. Cultural dislocation. Let's think about that for a minute. Fort McCoy in Wisconsin. Not long ago, there were 2 Afghans who were arrested, 2 Afghan refugees that barely been over here, probably a matter of days. And they were arrested, one for sexual abuse of a minor and the other for spousal abuse. Now, this story was reported. It went out over the national news. But one thing that was not in the national news stories and never would be, and that is these guys were just acting like they would in Afghanistan. They probably didn't realize what they were doing was illegal in the United States because it's perfectly fine to do in Afghan culture. And you may say, oh, Spencer, you Islamophobe, after all these years, you still are such a racist that you would say such a thing. Unfortunately, the reality is that Muhammad, the prophet of Islam, according to Islamic tradition, not according to Spencer, according to Islamic tradition, consummated his marriage with Aisha when she was 9 and he was 54. And because he is the excellent example, the Quran says he's the excellent example for Muslims. It's chapter 33, verse 21 of the Quran. You can check my work. It says that he is the excellent example without any qualification. That means anything he did is good to do. You're all right. If you follow Muhammad, you imitate Muhammad, you're good. So he's 54. He consummates his marriage with the 9-year-old. Child marriage is rampant in Afghanistan. In Afghanistan, when we toppled the Taliban back in 2003, aid workers went into the refugee camps and they found that half the girls of second grade age were already married, and all of the girls older than second grade were married. What's second grade? That's 9, isn't it? 9 or 10, thereabouts. And all the third grade girls and up were married. All of them. No exceptions. So this guy comes over to Fort McCoy. There's a kid walking by. I think it was a boy, actually. And that is another thing that's allowed in Islam. You know, the boys like pearls are there with the virgins of paradise. It's in the Quran. Bachabazi is something that is it's the practice of essentially pedophilia, widely practiced in Afghanistan. And the American troops were told, don't bother the Afghans, our allies, when you see them doing this. It's their culture. Let it go. So he came over here. What's the big deal? He probably did it many times before in Afghanistan. I'm sure he was totally surprised to end up arrested for doing something he figured was like taking a walk in the park. Same thing with spousal abuse. The Quran says, good women are obedient. As for those from whom you fear disobedience, mind you, it doesn't say as from those who are disobedient. It says from those from whom you fear disobedience. So, you know, if your wife is giving you the side eye and you think she's getting a little out of line and you think that maybe tomorrow she might disobey you, you can beat her today. It's in the Quran, chapter 4, verse 34. So this guy beats his wife in Fort McCoy. Here again, I'm sure he was shocked when he got arrested. As a matter of fact, he probably had contempt for those arresting him, because it has been this is one aspect of Islamic polemic against the West, the non-Muslim West, that has been little remarked upon. And that is that Muslim polemicists in the Islamic world, not in the West, but in the Islamic world, they tend to say that Western men are soft. They don't even beat their wives. They don't dare. They're afraid of their wives. This goes back to the Crusades, as a matter of fact. You read Islamic literature of the time of the Crusades, and they say the Franks are soft men. They're easy to beat. They're afraid of their wives even. They don't even beat their wives when their wives give them lip. So this guy does this, and he gets arrested. Now, we have 95,000 Afghans at least that we're bringing into the United States. How many more of them are going to commit sexual abuse of a minor, spousal abuse? It's just asking for all sorts of societal disruption. And of course, nobody talks about this. Nobody can say a word about this because it's racist, bigoted, and Islamophobic to do so. And so, you know, I saw this story in Kansas City that I mentioned before, and there's a photo with the story of these Afghan girls with the hijabs and the long skirts down to their ankles, playing ball with some kids, 12 years old, thereabouts, in Kansas City in some gym. And it's all so great. I'm sure those people in Kansas City are so pleased with themselves and think that they're doing this wonderful, generous, righteous thing in trying to make these people feel at home and get settled in their new land. And they have no idea what's coming. And they have no idea what the people that they're being so friendly to are saying about them behind their back. But you know, the Quran is something that Muslims actually believe. And the Quran says of the Muslims, you are the best of people. The best people on earth are the Muslims. That's chapter 3, verse 110. And the unbelievers are the most vile of created beings. That's chapter 98, verse 6. And so here are these kids playing ball with these Afghans, and everything is great. And then they go home and they say, don't get too close, don't touch them, they're unclean. It's chapter 9, verse 28 of the Quran. Don't get too close to them, they're vile, they're dirty, they're unbelievers. You think that the Afghans aren't saying that? Maybe some of them aren't. I'm sure there's some of them aren't. I'm sure that there's some of them who think, hooray, we're out of this Sharia hellhole. Maybe we can live a normal life. Absolutely. But I'm also sure that there's some of them who are saying, this is what the Quran says. And so we can take these things from these people because it is their due. It is their duty before Allah to take care of us. That's in the Quran too. Chapter 9, verse 29, fight against those who do not believe in, do not obey Allah and his messenger, and do not forbid what he has forbidden, even if they are of the people of the book, that's us, that's the Jews and Christians, until they pay the jizya with willing submission and feel themselves subdued. The jizya is more than just the tax that you pay if you're a non-Muslim in the Islamic State. It signifies that the job of the non-Muslim is to pay for the upkeep of the Muslim. That's our place in the world, to take care of them so they can wage jihad against us. That's the order of things that Allah has ordained. And that's why you see all the Muslim migrants coming over into Europe, and the Europeans were sold a bill of goods and told that they're going to be the workforce now because we're getting old. We need young people to take the jobs that we don't have people to take. And they were lied to. These people don't come take jobs, they go on welfare. And why do they go on welfare? Because it is our duty to take care of them. And if we don't pay the jizya outright, then we give them welfare payments, we give them furnished apartments in Kansas City, and so on. So this is just idiocy on a colossal scale. I can't overstate. I wish I were a parodist, you know. I wish I could be funny and make jokes out of this, but the Babylon Bee couldn't beat this stuff. This is just absolutely staggering stupidity on the part of the Biden administration. Of course, they're not only stupid, they're evil as well, in the sense of they do want to destroy national distinctions, borders, and establish an international order. And this is all part of that. So there's no denying that this is a very serious situation. And we can hope that we can turn this around in 22 and 24. The only possible way to do it, though, is if we have actual free elections, which is also in question right now. And so, well, we'll see. But otherwise, we will just take what comes and pray, hope, and don't worry, as has been said, and keep on doing what's right. Remember what Thomas More said: the times are never so bad that good people can't be good in them. And so let us strive to do that. And thank you very much. If you have questions, comments, or death fatwas, we can do that now.
Robert, that's terrific. We got a lot of questions in the chat room, but I think because we have a manifold sized group, if anyone has a meeting, just raise your hand or use the raise hand symbol down there at the bottom of your toolbar, and we'll have Robert take your questions. Christine, is your hand up? Yes, Christine, please go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you, Mr. Spencer. That was a fantastic presentation. I really appreciate how you intertwine current events with the Quran and the interpretations there. It's something that we need to be all disciplined to do. I have a couple big questions. One is, have you found any successful or heard any successful plans from especially border states to potentially defend against those NGOs and shut them down? Because like Texas what, $2 billion just in Texas for that Catholic NGO, the primary one that's funneling all these immigrants up. So I'd love to have some solutions or think tank background information on how we get that done.
I haven't heard of any such, but I hope that there is some going on. I'm sure there is. I know I saw Todd Bensman mentioned in the chat here, and certainly the Center for Immigration Studies and other groups of that kind are doing very good work on these issues. And some of it is getting wider traction. The Tennessee senators and the governor of Tennessee recently asked the Biden administration for information about the Afghans it was bringing into Tennessee, because pointing out, of course, that they're completely unvetted and we have no idea who they are. And so we'll see how that develops, and if they're able to get any accountability from the administration, or if they're able to push back at all, or rather than just allow these people to come into the state and then we're essentially playing Russian roulette.
Thank you.
Robert, Maria had a very interesting question. I'd like her to ask her question, or I could read it for you. Maria, if you want to unmute yourself and ask, or I can read the question.
Okay, can you hear me?
A little louder, closer to the mic, please.
Okay, I might have to be like right. You're gonna see my face really close. Can you hear me any better?
No, it's a little light. Let me read it for you. It says Muslims are infiltrating the law institutions, lawyers. Hold on, I get the right one here. Skipped on me here. Isn't welfare very much a part of the Islamic culture? The 7%.
7th century.
Is it part of their culture?
Welfare, you mean?
A U.S. welfare for immigrants.
I'm not sure I understand the question. Can you explain to me what you have in mind?
Maria, you say the 7-cent caliphate story, if I spelled that right. I don't know what the 7 cent is you're referring to.
7th century.
Yeah, that part I got.
Okay.
I don't understand what you mean is welfare part of Islamic culture. I mean, I explained before about the jizya and how the idea that non-Muslims owe the Muslims upkeep, that's very much part of Islamic culture. And
Okay.
you look at the history of jihad. You could read my book, The History of Jihad. The history of jihad is full of accounts of Muslims conquering various countries, and then they get the non-Muslims to pay the jizya, and as the non-Muslims are bled dry, as they grow poorer and poorer and their community is smaller, then the conquest has to continue so that the revenues don't fall. And actually the decline of various Islamic empires is correlated to the lack of conquest, the exhaustion of the subject communities, and thus the loss of the economic base, because it's all based on the tribute paid by the non-Muslims.
Yes, Robert, you answered that correctly. I misspoke. She asked it as a question, Spencer, isn't welfare a very, very much a part of the Islamic culture? And obviously you said yes and explained how in good detail. I have a question for you, if you could. The judges across the country, we get such a mixed bag of decisions that are favorable or unfavorable towards Sharia law or Sharia interpretation. Do you think that is just sympathetic, uneducated people, or is there an infusion of jihadist, Islamic supporting mindsets in the judicial system today?
Well, in the judiciary, you've got judges that you can roughly classify by the administrations under which they were appointed. So they generally follow, not always, of course, although the ones who don't follow the general line of the presidents who appointed them usually are going to the left. We never see judges who were appointed by leftists become conservative. And that, you know, when that keeps happening and happens again and again and again, you got to wonder, are these people being threatened? are they being blackmailed? Are they being manipulated in some way?
Yeah.
Because otherwise it's inexplicable that, Trump went through so much trouble to appoint these judges to the Supreme Court, justices, and immediately they turn and start to espouse the positions that he was supposedly trying to prevent from being espoused. You got to wonder. But anyway, the thing about leftist judges in general, Obama judges, Clinton judges, of which there's still quite a few, even Bush judges to some degree, they don't know anything about Islam. And they understand that Islam is a religion of peace, and that there are some Islamophobes, hate mongers in the country, like Spencer and Brigitte Gabriel and so on, who think that Islam is some kind of a problem and oppose Sharia. And Sharia, as far as they don't know Sharia from Shinola. The only thing they know about Sharia is that it's Islamic religious law, like Jewish law or canon law for Catholics. And so they think that these racist, bigoted hate mongers oppose this religious law just because they hate Muslims. They don't have any idea about how Sharia is a political, authoritarian, supremacist, and violent legal code. They don't know any of that. And so they see opposition to Sharia or opposition to a mosque, and they think it's just bigotry and racism and hatred. And so they rule accordingly.
Christine, I thought you had your hand up. Do you have another question? If not, I have one. Yeah, unmute yourself, please.
Really quick, two-part question. What's your estimate on how many radical Muslims are crossing over that border? What's your percent of the total that are coming over? It's really hard to get to that number, to split it out.
Yeah, I don't even want to give you a guess, because it would just be a total guess.
There's really no way. No one knows, right?
Nobody knows. That's the problem. It's not just that I don't know. It's that Customs and Border Patrol doesn't know.
Yeah.
Joe Biden doesn't know. Of course, you can say that about everything. Nobody knows. And so it doesn't even take very many to wreak havoc. Remember that 3,000 people were killed on September 11th, 2001 by 19 hijackers. And so when we think about the southern border, have 19 jihadis crossed? Almost certainly. Have 38, 76? Almost certainly. And then we got 95,000 Afghans. That's a lot of 9/11.
That leads me to my second question. You have any insiders or friends that have provided to you any of the vetting procedures that they're trying to employ right now?
I have no insider friends. I used to.
We're all on the outside.
A lot of years have passed here, and the Obama administration particularly worked hard to weed out opposition and politicize the intelligence agencies and law enforcement agencies. And I thought, I was naive in 2017. I thought, well, now this is going to turn around under Trump. Mm-hmm. It didn't. Instead, those agencies that had been politicized under Obama went to work against the new administration. Yeah. And now they're just continuing business as usual. I don't know anybody inside. I don't know that there is anybody left inside who's any good. I hope so. But if there are, they are keeping their head down as they should and working very stealthily.
Thank you.
Richard, you have your hand up. Could you unmute yourself, please?
Yes. Thank you. Yes, Rick O'Reilly here with my mom, Carol Ann.
Hello.
So good to see Robert Spencer again.
Likewise.
Again, yes. Yeah, from Bakersfield, California. Yeah, you've been here a couple of times.
Great.
I was wondering your thoughts, because the pullout out of Afghanistan was handled so poorly. That do you feel like we'll have to go back again militarily to go fix the problems created.
I sure hope not. I sure hope we don't. Can you imagine? I mean, look, 20 years went by and nothing changed.
Mm-hmm.
The Taliban was in charge when we went into Afghanistan. When we left Afghanistan, the Taliban was in charge.
Right.
That was with a military that at various points, especially during the Trump years, was actually reasonably well managed. Can you imagine if we went in now with this woke military that can't win Twitter fights, that is all worried about critical race theory?
Good point.
Yeah.
It would take 40 years and we'd leave and the Taliban would be in charge.
Yeah.
So I certainly hope we don't go back in. If we did go back in, it would be useless, even if we had a good military, because we have to understand that these are patient. The jihadis are very patient. They believe they're fighting a 1400-year struggle. Now, does this mean that we shouldn't fight them? Of course not. We should resist them, but we shouldn't think if we go in and spend 5 years in Afghanistan, we'll fix the problem, or 10 years, or 50, or 100. What we need to do is concentrate on containing, instead of Wilsonian nation building and trying to make Afghanistan like France, instead of doing that, we should concentrate on containing the jihad threat there and making sure they can't export their jihad anywhere else. So the idea that we're bringing Afghans over here, it's absolutely insane. That's the opposite of what we should be doing. We should be making sure that Afghans aren't leaving Afghanistan. And you say how cruel and heartless you are because they'll be left to the administrations of the Taliban. Well, you know, the Taliban is actually pretty popular there. And the people who don't like the Taliban, as I have noted before, are for the most part pro-Sharia Muslims themselves. So even if we want to have a safe haven for the people who helped us, there are plenty of places. Well, what about Pakistan? Then culturally, religiously, they have a bond with the people there. Pakistan is right next door. Could have put them all there. You'd hardly notice. They would think they were at home. So, in other words, what we need to do is make sure that 9/11 can't happen again, that they can't export their jihad again. But we don't have to be there militarily to do that.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Robert.
You.
Totally agree.
Agreed.
Anyone else have a question? Robert, let me, as they're thinking, let me ask one more question, kind of a little bit off topic, but maybe not. The war that's been going on between Shia and Sunni for so long in the Middle East, and with what's going on right now in Syria and Iran and Iraq, you think there's a chance that they might just be fighting so much with each other that they would somehow get a hold of a bomb and start really serious wars against the country's property that could trigger a bigger war? Do you think that exists, or do you think there's restraint enough that that's not a real risk?
No, that's a real risk. That could happen. But even the fact that they fight against each other does not mean that, I mean, it's okay, look, in a certain sense, yes. When they fight against each other, then they're not fighting against us. And that, from our standpoint, is not a bad thing. And you can say, oh, that's terrible. We need to go over there and make sure that the Sunnis and Shia don't fight each other. That's Condoleezza Rice and others, you know, have said this kind of thing. That's not our responsibility. The Sunnis and Shia were fighting each other long before there was the United States, and probably will be long after. So here again, our responsibility is to take care of ourselves. But is it possible that their conflict could spill out? Yes, and that's what we should be concentrating on trying to make sure does not happen. At the same time, there's an old Arabic proverb that translates to my brother against my brother and both of us against our cousin. So even though they hate each other, they'll still work together against infidels. After all, remember, Iran is Shiite, but they fund Hamas, which is Sunni, because they both hate Israel that much. And so the jihad against the West will not end because the Sunni Shiite jihad is heating up, as it appears to be.
Yeah. Paul, you had your hand up. Please unmute yourself first.
Yeah, I had Clara Lopez on my show, and she was talking about how Iran was actually one of the financiers and had Al-Qaeda hiding there. So I think we're more likely to see the enemy of my enemy is my friend more likely with Shiite and Sunni than anything else.
Indeed. Absolutely.
Anyone else? I don't see any other hands up.
Jim.
Hey, it's Jim. Hey, Robert.
Hi, Jim.
Good to hear you. Great to see you.
See you.
I got to go actually to another meeting, but before I go, I wanted to ask. My view of Afghanistan is that it's actually going to be much more stable now, not because the Taliban have taken over and so much, the other organizations are not very well able to fight them, but because really people who are going to be in charge now are communist China. That's my view. I'd like to hear what your assessment of that, because I think that's really what happened.
We hope so, but there might be a few bumps in the road for them. Interesting note, yesterday there was a story out of Pakistan. And Pakistan is also, of course, essentially turning, China is turning Pakistan into a satellite and trying to make a crescent, so to speak, of Pakistan and Afghanistan, and then put pressure on India. Yeah. But the Chinese workers in a plant in Pakistan were attacked by the Pakistani workers because the Pakistani workers thought that something that they were manufacturing, I've forgotten what, but anyway, they thought it was blasphemous. And so they were enraged and start beating up the Chinese. And I think, well, this is interesting. We can grab some popcorn and see what happens here. How are the Chinese going to react to that? And how is that kind of behavior, which is certain to continue, of course, what kind of impact is it going to have on China's plans? And that, I think, it bears watching.
Thanks. I got to go, guys. Thanks.
Good to see you, Jim.
You too, Robert.
Okay. Jim Coley, I look like, were you waving or do you have a question? You need to unmute yourself.
I'm so used to classrooms where I had to be quiet. This is terrific. Thank you very much, Robert, for your talk today. One thing I've thought about is the situation with Israel now with weakened support from the Biden administration, how that will play out. I had heard a thing actually it was a church where they had a thing called Prophecy Update. One thing headline they featured was that Israel is parking F-35s in Azerbaijan. That it's intended for a possible attack in Iran against nuclear facilities. So I don't know where this is going to lead to, but I tell you, when it comes between the Jews and Muslims, it's such a volatile situation.
Yeah, it's interesting. Azerbaijan, of course, is a Muslim country, but it is at odds with Iran because Iran has a significant Azeri minority population that they want to keep at bay. They want to keep them from getting too restless and thinking, hey, there's this independent Azeri country right across the border. We could join up with them. And so they're very nervous about the Azeris, very hostile to Azerbaijan, which gives an opening to Israel to deal with Azerbaijan. It may be that there will be more Muslim countries entering the Abraham Accords, actually, because of the shared threat of Iran. And so the Biden administration, by appeasing Iran, may end up actually aiding Israel in the long run. We can hope that would be a good outcome.
Yes.
We have about 7 more minutes before the meeting goes. 3 questions. One is from on the board, Maria, whose microphone is not working. She asked, the problem is that there are members of the PA, I mean Palestinian authorities, I'm assuming, in the Parliament of Israel now. Was she referring to one of your earlier comments, Robert?
Yeah, they're not just in the parliament, they're in the government.
Mhm.
They've been in the Knesset for a long time. Not members of the Palestinian Authority as such, but members of Arab parties that have made no secret of their distaste for Israel and desire to destroy it, even though they're in the Israeli parliament.
Yeah.
So that you got now, as part of the ruling coalition of the Prime Minister, Naftali Bennett, you have an Arab party that makes no secret of wanting Sharia. And so we'll see how that plays out.
All right. And Carl Goldberg, you had your hand up. If you could unmic yourself, and after that, we'll go to Richard O'Reilly. Okay. You want to unmute yourself, or? Okay. Christine, can you unmute him?
There we go. I was just greeting you, Robert. Hello. Thank you so much.
Good to see you. Thanks for being here.
Okay. And Richard, you had your hand up?
No question here, Bob. Just thank you so much.
Okay, we got one gentleman joining us very late, and unfortunately, he probably hasn't had a chance to hear this wonderful.
Click special, you want to unmute and ask a question?
Sure.
Sorry,
I mean, one of the many ways we're getting hit, as Robert was just talking about, is the refugees. And according to the definition of refugees, they should be relocated in a bordering country, settled there until they can be settled back to their own country. So by bringing them here and putting them on a permanent for life welfare, housing, food, education, they are doing exactly what Robert mentioned. They're bleeding the non-Muslims. That, along with what the left's doing to our budget. I mean, we're getting hit so many ways, and I am leading to a question. But I mean, even the defunding the police. Our local police is our first contact with suspicious activity that sometimes leads to the arrest of these people planning and plotting. Our energy and oil policy, where we were the leading energy and oil suppliers under Donald Trump, that's been taken away. So we're getting hit on all fronts, as you can imagine, and I can talk for another hour about all the other fronts. And as we spoke yesterday, Robert, I asked you if there's any type of recommendation or suggestion you could say, what could we do in terms of actions, of activities? What can we possibly do to stop on, maybe focus on one of these fronts and just focus on that? But what can we do as an individual?
I would say the main thing that we can do, we all must do right now, is work for election integrity and for the end of the mail-in balloting, for the end of all this massive cheating, so that we can have fair elections. And if we have fair elections, I'm confident that the American people will vote the political class out and bring in people who will start to tackle these problems instead of making them worse. So I would say, if you have anything you can do to work for that over the next year, that's what you should focus on.
Unfortunately, a lot of times that gets tied up in legal proceedings, which takes years and years and years. And I'm afraid the damage is going to be done.
We got to keep trying. It ain't over till it's over.
No, we're going to keep fighting. Thank you, Robert.
Robert, thank you so much for a very stimulating and timely presentation. You have stirred the minds of all of us, I'm sure. For those of you who are interested in knowing more about Act for America, Mission Vale chapter, Christine, can you put up the slide 9? And we'll take a look at that as we close our meeting here. And while she's doing that, I want to also mention that if you're interested in knowing more about Act for America, if you're not familiar with the national organization, you can go to the website, which is www.actforamerica.org. And last but not least, again, thank you all for taking the time to attend today's meeting. And for those who are not familiar with Zoom, you have to leave the leading, there's a little leave message or exit in the lower right-hand corner. Thank you all so much again. Be well. God bless.
Thank you, Bob.
God bless. Have a good night.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Good night.
Good night, Bob. Thank you much. This
Thank
was
you.
a great meeting.
Good night. God bless America.
Indeed.
Blessing.
Good night, everyone. Christine, thanks so much for all your good work.
Thanks, Christine. Good job, Bob.
Okay, excellent. Carl, good seeing you again.
Good seeing you too, Bob. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob.
Okay, Larry.
I had a little technical difficulty there, but I don't know why. I couldn't pull it up on my iPad. I had to just use my phone, which is really weird.
Yeah, because of the technical problem, I lost my mic 30 seconds before going into the presentation. So I didn't get the recording started at time because I was fussing around with trying to find out how to get my microphone back working. So
yeah, no problem.
It is recorded, but it starts about 8 or 9 minutes into the start of this.
Everyone should remember to go to Robert's site, jihadwatch.org, to get his books and donate to help him for his cause also.
Right. One last thing. He was talking about the Pakistani workers were beating up the Chinese workers for doing what? What did they suspect they were making?
I didn't hear that part. I must have been taking notes.
He didn't specify specifically what they were making. He just noted that whatever they were making was blasphemous to their
blasphemous to them. Okay, I see. I got it. Okay. All right. Hey. All right. Well,
did anybody learn
Thanks
anything?
a lot, gentlemen. We'll be in touch.
Yeah, just one thing that I was going to try to get Robert to talk about, but it didn't have a right place to put it in. He did a paper back in March of 2020 where he interviewed 80 politically large figure Muslim public officials, asking them, would they rather work under the U.S. Constitution or Sharia law? What do you think the percentage is that said they wanted and insisted to be Sharia law?
90%.
Close, a little higher.
99.
93%.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've been tremendously naive about what's going on. That's for sure.
Yeah, and that just speaks to the how much indoctrination is going on in the mosques and in organizations that are Islamic related. It's way deeper than we give credit to.
Yeah.
Or acknowledge. Yeah.
I guess one question I was going to ask him is there's a lot of people that don't believe 9/11 was actually carried out by the Muslims. It was carried out by somebody else like the CIA. Is there any credence to that, or we're just not going to know for a while?
No, that's a total BS line. It's part of, one of the things Muslims and Marxists and communists and socialists are all very good at, and that is create chaos and misdirection and misinformation. And there's a perfect example of it. Keep everything up in the air. It's part of the chaotic theme they love to drive into the country because they think it gives them a ledge to get their agenda in because people are so busy looking left, right, up, and down. They're not paying attention to what's going on in front of them. I mean, look at the evidence as to who came in. It's unbelievable. Yeah.
Well, yeah. Then you have somebody like L. Lynn Wood, who would normally have this tremendous credibility, saying that it wasn't done by airplanes. I mean, that's just bizarre. Yeah. I'm like, what is that about?
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Marion,
well, anyway, yeah. Thanks, Bob. I got to run, but I appreciate it. Take care. Thank you. Be in touch.
Marion, you had your hand up, I thought.
Yeah, because a lot of people in the Arab world to this day still believe that the Jews did 9/11.
Oh, yeah.
And people have been surveyed in the Middle East. The majority believe that.
Sad but true. But, that's, again, going back to what the Marxists are so good at and the socialists and those forces that are working to tear down our country. One of the primary examples, if you look at, no matter what the diversion, no matter what flavor it's coming from, creating chaos, looking the other way, the story that they're putting out isn't the real story. The whole story is they want to have a revolution and they'll do anything to stir up the pot to keep everybody off balance. That's the game. So what you see on the mainstream media, don't believe it. Don't believe 99% of what's coming out there because it's all controlled news. It's funneled through social networks, through mainstream television, through people who are in positions of authority, who are respected, but they are working on their own agenda. It's coming at us from so many directions, and it's so easy to fall and believe it. And it's just be terribly skeptical about almost everything you hear today. Just remember, they've got one big goal in mind, and that's to destroy this country and turn it socialism, ultimately to make it communism, to make it run by a tyrannical government. That doesn't make a difference whether you're talking about Marxists or communists or socialists or Islamists. All of them defeat America and its greatness and what it's built on. And that's what we've got to protect.
And
the
we have to
mainstream-
stop- we
the
have to
mainstream
stop using
media.
stop using the soft word socialist. This is a communist takeover.
Absolutely.
Let's not let them get by saying progressives or socialists. This is communists.
Yeah.
And so they're
Absolutely.
admitting socialists now. So what 5 years from now they're going to admit communists? Well, let's just start
Yeah.
calling it communists right now.
Yeah. Well, we got a lot of risk going on between Taiwan and China, what's going on in the Middle East, what's going on between the Sunnis and the Shia. There's just the internal battles within our own country because of all the liberal and leftist rules and the crazy policies that are happening in our Congress and in the White House in particular. Lots of fronts, a lot of frustration, a lot of damage that can potentially be done to our country before we elect reasonable people back in positions of authority in our government to lead this country. But the damage is going to be deep before we get to those elections. And of course, it goes without saying, if we're not fighting for election integrity so that the vote that does happen in 2022 and 24, if we don't really have control of our elections, it's hopeless. It's gone. We will not have a chance to recover no matter how many good people are out there doing the right thing.
And the mainstream media is willingly compliant, and they're going to be the ones that they've got the sheep already.
That's right.
We have to get the message out, and we have to let them know what the truth is, and we have to turn them away from the mainstream media.
You're absolutely right, Eric. Absolutely right.
Well, they
I like to simplify things, and I can make we could leave this meeting with some sort of positive note. Is that how do we do this? How do we secure our elections? How do we turn this ship around? How do we prevent next year looking at a democratic socialist America? Because that's their agenda this year, right? And it's really simple, guys. We've got to raise our numbers. We know that over half our country voted for Trump, right? They're all waiting on the wings, waiting for leaders to gather them together under their wings and point them in the right direction. And the most simple thing that we can do is to send real grassroots thunder and lightning to the Hill and to our state capitals. We have all the power. We have all the numbers. And what Eric was saying about the media being complicit, if we're silent, if we're not engaged, we are complicit, right? And that's the thing that we need to tell our family, our friends, our neighbors. We need you to take, here's a action tools, takes you 2 minutes, sacrifice. I don't want to hear how busy you are. I've got a 2-minute task for you. Help us take back America. We need to do that rally cry, asking massive numbers to do the simplest things. And that's how we take it back. That's what every working class American, everyone understands it. Representative government cannot represent us if we're not voicing what it is we're asking them to do. So give them a spine, give those guys in those elected seats the spine and the courage through our groundswell grassroots approach. That's how we take this country back, is when we the people start acting like it. We have let go. Yes. And it's time to take back those reins. So it's totally possible. You already know the numbers are there. Remember, I just want to remind you they're there. They're just waiting on the wings. Let's gather them up. Let's unite. 1776 strong, 1776 unite, and let's get this job done. We could do that in the matter of months if we all were working at that very thing. That so simple thing.
So true, Christine. And Carl, before.
Yeah, one way to increase our audience, which I have been using for a couple of years now, is to leave relatively short comments, no more than about 200 words, on different Facebook groups, because those groups have hundreds and sometimes thousands of members who are alerted to a new comment on their Facebook group. There are thousands of Facebook groups around the country, of Republican groups of all kinds, conservative groups of all kinds. We can use that to reach our audience. Otherwise, we end up speaking to ourselves, preaching to the choir. But if you want to reach more people, go to those Facebook groups as long as Facebook permits us still to do that.
Good
And
point, Carl. Thank you.
The key is brevity.
Yeah,
The shorter the comment, the more likely they are to read it.
indeed. Indeed. Well, thank you all. Wonderful seeing good friends again. We'll do this again.
Thank you, Bob.
Hey, thank
See you
you.
next
Love to everybody. God bless.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
You.
Bye-bye.
See you next week.
Right.